She was worshipped as fashion's flawless goddess, yet perfection can be the most dangerous mask of all. Behind Claudia Schiffer's icy smile lurk questions the industry never dared to answer. For the world, she was the golden face of the 1990s, the era when the word supermodel became a global obsession. But behind the shimmering magazine covers and million-dollar contracts, whispers followed her like a shadow. Was she truly as untouchable as she appeared, or was her perfection carefully staged to hide deeper cracks? To understand Claudia Schiffer is to step back into a decade when beauty was power and a single face could launch 1,000 campaigns. She was the poster child of that glamorous age. Towering blonde hair that shimmered under flashing bulbs, crystal blue eyes that seemed to freeze time, and a body sculpted into what designers called the commercial ideal. She was compared endlessly to Brigitte Bardot, a reincarnation of the French screen siren, though some wondered if being branded as a copy was a curse in disguise. Even at her peak, Claudia's story was never free from the shadows of doubt. The supermodel phenomenon of the 1990s was a world of dazzling lights but brutal undercurrents. Naomi Campbell, fierce and fiery, made headlines for her temper as much as her talent. Kate Moss embodied grunge beauty with a body that sparked endless controversy. Cindy Crawford became the all-American dream, smiling as she crossed from catwalk to television screens. But Claudia Schiffer, she stood apart. Unlike the others, she rarely courted scandal in public. She didn't throw tantrums, she didn't spiral into substance struggles, she didn't bare her soul to the press. Instead, she stood like a statue, perfect, silent, and chillingly distant. For some, that icy demeanor was her greatest strength. For others, it was proof that something was being hidden. Her relationship with David Copperfield only added fuel to the fire. A supermodel and a magician. What could be more glamorous, more theatrical? The world swooned as they appeared hand in hand, and tabloids dubbed them the golden couple. But almost as quickly, rumors turned sour. Was this love, or was it an illusion staged for publicity? The speculation became so intense that even lawsuits surfaced, with former associates of Copperfield alleging that the romance was nothing more than a contract of affection. Claudia herself never broke her silence. She let the world wonder, reinforcing the image of an ice queen who never melted even when fire burned beneath her. The fashion world, ruthless as it is, thrives on perfection but feeds on scandal. Claudia Schiffer, strangely, embodied both. On one hand, she was the immaculate face of Chanel, Guess, and L'Oreal, appearing on more than 1,000 magazine covers, a staggering record that cemented her place in history. On the other, she was often portrayed as too perfect, too polished, too cold. While Naomi Campbell radiated heat and volatility, Claudia radiated frost and restraint. Photographers adored her symmetry, but fellow models whispered that she was unreachable, untouchable. In an industry built on connection and charisma, Claudia was accused of being nothing more than a beautiful brand. And then, almost without warning, she was gone. The ice queen of fashion, who seemed destined to reign forever, slipped quietly out of the spotlight. No dramatic scandal forced her retreat, no catastrophic fall from grace. One moment she was everywhere, plastered across runways, billboards, and perfume ads. And the next, she was almost nowhere. She married Matthew Vaughn, a rising film director, and retreated into the English countryside with their children. While her peers continued to fight for relevance, some clinging desperately to the runways, others reinventing themselves in television and reality shows, Claudia chose silence. But silence can be louder than any headline, and Claudia's silence has haunted fashion for 2 decades. Did she step away to protect herself from the relentless machine of fame? Or was she quietly pushed aside by a younger, hungrier generation of models who no longer saw room for an icy queen in a world craving heat? Some insist that she chose the perfect moment to leave, preserving her image forever untarnished. Others suspect that behind closed doors, the pressure, the comparisons, and the endless branding finally became too much to bear. Her story is not one of scandal splashed in tabloids or tragic downfall immortalizing cautionary tales. Instead, Claudia Schiffer's story is a riddle, the mystery of a woman who seemed to have everything only to walk away from it all. Why would someone at the height of beauty, wealth, and power choose to vanish into the shadows? Was it strength or surrender? A story like Claudia Schiffer's doesn't begin in the glittering halls of Paris or under the blinding lights of New York. It begins in Rheinberg, a quiet, almost unremarkable German town where few would have imagined the birth of a global icon. Claudia was the daughter of a lawyer, raised in a conservative household where discipline outweighed glamour. By all accounts, she was shy, studious, even awkward, a far cry from the icy goddess the world would later know. But perhaps it was that very distance from glamour that made her eventual transformation so startling. From a young age, Claudia carried the air of someone who didn't quite fit in. Tall, blonde, and unusually striking even as a teenager, she towered over her classmates. Yet she never considered herself beautiful. Teachers described her as diligent but withdrawn. Friends remembered her as polite, almost too reserved. She once dreamed of following in her father's footsteps and studying law. Fate, however, had other plans. That twist of fate came one night in Dusseldorf. Claudia was just 17 when a scout from Elite Model Management spotted her in a nightclub. In that instant, the trajectory of her life changed. What her small town had overlooked, the fashion world devoured. The symmetry, the golden hair, the porcelain skin. She was invited to Paris, a city that could turn nobodies into legends overnight. But Paris also had a reputation for devouring the young and unprepared. Claudia entered the fashion world at a time when the industry was hungry for archetypes. And in her, they saw an instant archetype, the modern Brigitte Bardot. The resemblance was undeniable. Full lips, blonde mane, sultry eyes that could shift from innocence to seduction in a single glance. Designers and photographers latched on to the comparison like a lifeline. She wasn't just a model, she was a reincarnation, a fantasy reborn for a new generation. But beneath the applause lay a dangerous question. Was Claudia Schiffer being celebrated for who she was or for who she resembled? Her first major breakthrough came with Guess jeans in the late 1980s. The black and white campaigns were electric, catapulting her from relative obscurity to international recognition. With each photograph, she wasn't just selling denim, she was selling an idea of timeless, sultry femininity. The Guess campaigns made her a star, but they also cemented the Bardot comparison. It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gave her a rapid rise to fame. On the other, it tethered her identity to another woman's legacy. Soon after, Karl Lagerfeld himself took notice. To be chosen by Lagerfeld was to be anointed into fashion royalty. With Chanel as her platform, Claudia was launched into an orbit few models could ever reach. Lagerfeld adored her, called her his muse, and pushed her onto runways where her statuesque frame seemed almost unreal. But even in her earliest days with Chanel, whispers began to circulate. Some in the industry claimed Lagerfeld didn't see Claudia as an individual, but as a vessel, an echo of Bardot, a commercial fantasy molded for profit. But still, Claudia delivered. She walked the most prestigious runways, graced the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar, and became the face of luxury campaigns from Paris to New York. Each appearance built on the myth of the perfect German doll. But even at perfection, breeds suspicion. Behind closed doors, critics muttered that Claudia was too commercial, too cold, too much of a brand to ever be considered true high fashion. She wasn't Linda Evangelista, the chameleon who transformed for every shoot. She wasn't Naomi Campbell, the fiery storm that could dominate any catwalk. Claudia was always Claudia, immovable, pristine, untouchable. For some, that was her genius. For others, it was her prison. In interviews, Claudia rarely revealed much. She didn't indulge in wild anecdotes or fiery declarations. She spoke softly,
carefully, as though the world was dissecting her every word. That restraint only deepened the mystery. Was she protecting herself? Or was she simply hollow beneath the shine? To this day, even those who worked closest with her admit they never truly knew her. Claudia was present, yet absent. Visible, yet unreachable. By the early 1990s, Claudia Schiffer had risen from a quiet German teenager to one of the most recognized faces in the world. But even as she stood atop the fashion industry, the cracks were already forming. She was adored by designers, coveted by advertisers, and idolized by millions. Yet whispers followed her everywhere, that she owed her fame not to herself but to Bardot's ghost, that her perfection was exaggerated, that her coldness was calculated. For Claudia, the rise to fame was as swift as it was suffocating. She had achieved what most could only dream of, yet she was already haunted by the shadows of expectation and doubt. Perhaps that is why even at her brightest, her gaze often seemed distant, as if she knew the crown she wore came with a weight too heavy to bear.
By the early 1990s, Claudia Schiffer was no longer just a model, she was an empire. The shy German teenager had been transformed into the most photographed woman on earth, her face staring back at millions from glossy magazine racks, billboards, and perfume ads. She wasn't simply a part of fashion's golden age, she was its crown jewel. But as the world bowed to her beauty, the line between reality and illusion grew dangerously thin. Claudia's dominance was staggering. She graced the covers of Vogue and Elle with such regularity that editors confessed they could sell more copies simply by placing her face on the front. She became the first model to appear on more than 1,000 magazine covers, a record that remains one of fashion's most remarkable feats. Her contracts were equally legendary. From Chanel to Revlon, from Guess to L'Oreal, she embodied the lucrative blend of elegance and accessibility that brands craved. She wasn't just the ice queen of the runway, she was the golden goose of the advertising world. On the runway, Claudia moved with a precision that was almost unsettling. She didn't explode with charisma like Naomi Campbell, nor did she reinvent herself like Linda Evangelista. Claudia was constant, frozen perfection, an untouchable goddess gliding under the lights. For designers, that consistency was invaluable. For critics, it became a point of attack. Was Claudia Schiffer truly versatile, or was she merely selling the same flawless mask over and over again? Yet it was her personal life that turned her into a global obsession. In 1993, Claudia began dating David Copperfield, the world's most famous magician. To the public, it seemed like a fairy tale. The illusionist and the supermodel, beauty and magic entwined. They appeared together at galas, premieres, and television specials, and Copperfield even brought Claudia on stage during his shows, casting her as both assistant and muse. It was spectacle at its finest, the most glamorous couple on earth, dazzling audiences with love and illusion. But as the cameras flashed, doubt crept in. The relationship seemed almost too perfect, too theatrical. Rumors began to swirl. Was this truly love, or was Claudia playing a role in Copperfield's greatest trick of all? The whispers grew louder when allegations surfaced that their romance had been, at least in part, orchestrated. A publicity arrangement designed to boost Copperfield's profile and maintain Claudia's dominance in headlines. Lawsuits were even filed by former associates, claiming Claudia had signed a so-called love contract. Neither she nor Copperfield confirmed the rumors, but neither denied them outright either. Their silence became its own kind of performance, feeding speculation rather than quelling it. For nearly 6 years, the couple maintained their image as fashion's most improbable love story. Yet insiders in the fashion world often question how real the bond truly was. Claudia, typically guarded, revealed nothing. Her eyes betrayed no warmth. Her smile remained perfectly poised. If there was truth behind the illusion, she wasn't about to let the world see it. When the engagement finally ended in 1999, There was no dramatic scandal, no explosive revelation, just another unanswered question added to the growing mystery of Claudia Schiffer. Even beyond her romance, Claudia's peak years were marked by contradictions. She was adored as one of the most successful models in history, yet she was constantly criticized for being too commercial. Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, and Kate Moss were hailed as artistic icons, pushing boundaries with editorial work and avant-garde campaigns. Claudia, in contrast, was accused of being a safe bet for advertisers. Beautiful, reliable, but lacking edge. To her detractors, she wasn't a muse, she was a mannequin. To her defenders, she was precisely what the fashion industry needed, a model who could transcend fashion itself and sell to the masses. Photographers, too, saw two sides of her. Some swore that Claudia was one of the most professional models they had ever worked with, disciplined, patient, never temperamental. Others described her as distant, cold, unwilling to engage beyond what was necessary. One photographer remarked years later, "She gave the image, but never herself." That distance became her signature, the glacial aura that set her apart. Yet it also raised a haunting question. Had Claudia Schiffer mastered the art of modeling by perfecting the illusion of presence, while always keeping her true self absent? Her wealth and fame during this period were unparalleled. By the mid-1990s, Claudia was earning tens of millions annually, cementing her status not only as a supermodel, but as one of the most financially powerful women in the world. She owned mansions, attended elite parties, and rubbed shoulders with the most powerful figures in fashion and entertainment. To outsiders, she was untouchable, but to those who paid attention, her icy composure suggested something else. A woman aware that everything around her was fragile, that one crack in the illusion could shatter the empire she had built. And perhaps that's why Claudia Schiffer, at the very peak of glamour, never seemed entirely at ease. In countless interviews, she avoided controversy, refused to gossip, and rarely expressed vulnerability. Some saw this as professionalism, others saw it as emptiness. Behind the glassy perfection, was there a woman who longed for freedom or one who feared exposure? The 1990s crowned Claudia Schiffer as the ultimate supermodel. Yet as the decade ended, her reign began to feel less like triumph and more like a performance stretched too far. The lights were still bright, the applause still loud, but Claudia's icy gaze seemed to look past it all, as if she already knew the illusion couldn't last forever.
Every empire, no matter how dazzling, begins to show its cracks. For Claudia Schiffer, those cracks weren't scandals splashed across tabloid covers or meltdowns caught by paparazzi lenses. They were subtler, quieter, but no less damning. Whispers in the back rooms of fashion houses, questions about authenticity, and rumors that her perfection was little more than a carefully guarded illusion. The first crack was the relentless comparison to Brigitte Bardot. What once propelled her rise became a shackle. Journalists, designers, even fans repeated the mantra, Claudia was Bardot reborn. But with each repetition came an implication, that Claudia herself wasn't enough. She was praised not for her individuality, but for her resemblance. For a model whose very job was to embody fantasy, it was an identity theft she could never quite escape. She was a ghost of someone else's legend, forced to live under the weight of borrowed glamour. Then came the perception of coldness. In an industry fueled by personality as much as beauty, Claudia's icy detachment became both her trademark and her curse. Colleagues whispered that she was distant, almost mechanical. Unlike Naomi Campbell, who exuded fire, or Cindy Crawford, who radiated warmth, Claudia seemed inaccessible. Perfect on camera, unreachable in person. Photographers often noted that while she delivered flawless images, she rarely engaged, rarely gave them glimpses of her inner life. She was like marble, one insider recalled, exquisite but cold to the touch. This era of detachment soon spilled into the media narrative. Journalists began to label her the Ice Queen, a title that carried both admiration and disdain. Admirers saw her as disciplined, controlled, untouchable. Critics painted her as aloof, lifeless, a model whose beauty was too flawless to be human. Either way, the nickname stuck, and with it came the perception that Claudia Schiffer was more mask than woman. Even her body, the so-called perfect 90-60-90 frame, wasn't immune to scrutiny. Fashion insiders whispered that her measurements were exaggerated, that her supposed perfection was polished for press releases rather than reality. The rumors stung because they chipped away at the very foundation of her image, the idea that she embodied the unattainable ideal. If those numbers weren't real, then what else about Claudia was fabrication? Her romance with David Copperfield, which had once seemed like a fairy tale, soon became another source of suspicion. The rumors of a contracted love refused to die, haunting her public persona even after the relationship ended. Every red carpet appearance was dissected. Was that smile rehearsed? Was her hand in his staged? Even when she stood silent, the world filled in the blanks with doubts. The magic that was supposed to elevate her only deepened the sense that nothing about Claudia could be trusted. And in the fiercely competitive world of supermodels, envy sharpened into hostility. Claudia's commercial dominance made her the envy of her peers, but also the target of their resentment. While Linda Evangelista reinvented herself as the chameleon muse of high fashion, Claudia was dismissed as safe, a model chosen for her marketability rather than artistry. Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss, Christy Turlington each carved out reputations for pushing boundaries. Claudia, in contrast, was accused of being predictable, a beautiful product designed to sell, not inspire. To some, she was the face of fashion's golden age. To others, she was proof of its hollow core. Yet perhaps the most revealing crack was her silence. In an era when models were becoming celebrities in their own right, giving interviews, starring in films, crossing into television, Claudia chose withdrawal. She rarely opened up about her personal struggles, never gave the public more than the image demanded. While this protected her from scandal, it also made her unknowable. And in the void of silence, speculation grew. People began to wonder, was Claudia hiding fragility beneath her icy exterior? Or was she simply uninterested in sharing herself, content to let the world believe what it wanted? Her retreat from vulnerability came at a cost. Fans adored her, but they didn't know her. The media admired her, but they couldn't connect with her. Even those closest to her in the fashion world admitted they never truly understood her. Claudia gave the world beauty, but she never gave herself. By the late 1990s, these cracks, comparisons, coldness, rumors, resentment, had accumulated into something impossible to ignore. Claudia Schiffer was still flawless on magazine covers, still commanding multi-million-dollar contracts, still hailed as one of the most successful models of all time. But beneath the surface, the narrative had shifted. She was no longer just the golden girl of fashion. She had become a paradox, the most visible woman in the world, yet somehow invisible at the same time. And that paradox begged the question the industry couldn't answer. How long can a mask of perfection hold before it collapses under its own weight of illusions?
One day, she was everywhere. And then, almost without warning, she was gone. Claudia Schiffer, the woman who once ruled every runway, every glossy cover, every billboard, slipped into the shadows, leaving the fashion world to ask a question it still hasn't answered. Why did she walk away? The official story was deceptively simple. By the early 2000s, Claudia had achieved everything there was to achieve. She had broken records, earned millions, and secured her place in the pantheon of supermodels. When she married British film director Matthew Vaughn in 2002 and started a family, she said she wanted to step back, to focus on raising her children and building a private life away from the glare of the cameras. To many, it seemed like a natural choice. A woman retreating gracefully at the right time, trading the chaos of fame for the peace of family life. But fashion doesn't forgive absence easily, and silence, Claudia's greatest weapon, became the soil in which rumors grew. Some believed her retreat was not entirely voluntary. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw a brutal shift in fashion. The era of the supermodel was ending, replaced by a new generation of celebrities, actresses, pop stars, reality TV personalities, who now grace magazine covers once reserved for models. Claudia, with her icy perfection, suddenly seemed like a relic of another time.
Whispers suggested she hadn't stepped down by choice. She had been pushed aside. Others claimed the retreat was strategic, a way to preserve the myth. If Claudia had stayed, critics argued, she would have been forced to adapt to compete with younger models who embrace edgier, raw aesthetics. Her polished, almost otherworldly beauty might have felt out of place in a world chasing imperfection and grunge. By disappearing, Claudia froze herself in time, forever remembered as the golden goddess of the 1990s, untouched by decline. Better to vanish at your peak, some said, than to fade in plain sight. And then there were the darker theories. Some insiders suggested that Claudia's silence hid deeper fractures, burnout, disillusionment, or scars from the years of playing the Ice Queen. Modeling had been her mask, and the mask had become unbearable. The David Copperfield romance, still clouded in suspicion, had added to the sense that Claudia's life was one long performance. To step away, to retreat into private life, might have been the only way to reclaim her identity. Others whispered of conflicts behind the scenes, of rivalries and betrayals within the fashion houses, of contracts soured by egos and power struggles. The retreat also sparked speculation about whether Claudia feared being dethroned. By the time she stepped back, Kate Moss had already cemented her reign as the face of the grunge era. Naomi Campbell continued to dominate with her fiery presence. And a younger wave of models like Gisele Bündchen was redefining what beauty meant in the new millennium. To stay might have meant witnessing her crown being passed on in real time. By leaving, Claudia denied the world that spectacle. Yet her disappearance was not absolute. She resurfaced occasionally, special campaigns, fashion documentaries, or anniversary shows, where she walked the runway as if time had stood still. But each appearance only reinforced the mystery. Claudia was no longer part of the everyday fabric of fashion. She was a ghostly presence, emerging only on her own terms, never long enough to satisfy curiosity. Her distance became part of her myth. And with that distance came the inevitable question. Did Claudia Schiffer retreat because she chose to, or because she had no other choice? Was her silence a declaration of power, or proof of defeat? To the world, she offered nothing in response. She didn't explain, she didn't justify, she didn't confess. Instead, she let the rumors swirl, the theories multiply, the mystery deepen. And in doing so, she ensured that her retreat would never be seen as ordinary. It was not the quiet exit of a woman tired of fame. It was a vanishing act, as carefully staged as any of David Copperfield's illusions. Claudia Schiffer's hidden retreat remains one of the fashion's most enduring riddles. She could have stayed, could have fought, could have reinvented herself, but instead she chose absence. And in that absence, she became untouchable, not just a supermodel, but a legend carved in ice, forever frozen at her peak. Some say she stepped away at the perfect moment, escaping the brutal turnover of an industry that devours its own. Others believe she was quietly forced out, replaced by fresher faces and shifting tastes. And a few whisper that Claudia simply couldn't bear to let the world see her imperfections. Whatever the truth, the result is the same. Claudia Schiffer walked away, and in her silence, she became immortal.
When Claudia Schiffer stepped back from the spotlight, she didn't fade into obscurity. She transformed into something even rarer. She became a myth. Her retreat, far from erasing her presence, magnified it. The world stopped seeing Claudia every day, but in doing so, it began to see her everywhere. In memory, in nostalgia, in the very definition of what it meant to be a supermodel. Her legacy is monumental. At her peak, Claudia embodied the height of 1990s glamour. Tall, blonde, ethereal, an icon who bridged commercial appeal and high fashion. But it was her disappearance that cemented her place in history. By stepping away, she froze her image in perfection, leaving no room for decline, no chance for her legend to be tarnished by time. When people think of Claudia Schiffer today, they don't picture her aging or struggling to adapt to trends. They remember her as the Ice Queen of the 1990s, flawless and untouchable. In absence, she became eternal. The numbers themselves speak of a legacy few can match. Over 1,000 magazine covers, a record unmatched by most of her peers. multi-million-dollar contracts that made her one of the wealthiest models of her generation. And perhaps most importantly, she was part of the select few who turned the word supermodel into a cultural phenomenon. Without Claudia, the 1990s supermodel era would feel incomplete. But her legacy isn't only measured in statistics. It lies in the way she defined a certain kind of beauty. Claudia wasn't edgy like Kate Moss or fiery like Naomi Campbell. She wasn't the all-American girl like Cindy Crawford. She was something else entirely. A figure of frozen perfection. A goddess who seemed beyond reach. She embodied the fantasy of fashion in its purest form. The idea that beauty could be flawless, sculpted, almost unreal. For admirers, this made her unforgettable. For critics, it made her inhuman. But either way, it made her unforgettable. Even her so-called flaws became part of her myth. The whispers of coldness, the accusations of being too commercial, the doubts about her authenticity. These only added to the sense that Claudia was not a woman, but a symbol, a projection of the industry's deepest desires and fears. She was adored and resented in equal measure, and that duality gave her story its power. Legends aren't built on perfection alone. They're built on the tension between what we see and what we suspect lies beneath the surface. Claudia Schiffer mastered that tension. Her retreat also reshaped her image. While other supermodels continued to hustle for relevance, taking TV gigs, reality shows, or reinventing themselves for new audiences, Claudia did the opposite. She withdrew. She allowed silence to do the work, and that silence was deafening. It forced the world to remember her not as she might be, but as she once was. Every rare reappearance, whether in a Chanel anniversary show or a retrospective campaign, felt like a glimpse of a ghost, a reminder of a past era that can never be recreated. This strategy, intentional or not, elevated Claudia beyond the realm of ordinary celebrity. She became something fashion rarely produces anymore, a true enigma. In a world where every model today documents their life on Instagram, Claudia's refusal to overexpose herself has made her more fascinating, not less. Her myth thrives precisely because she left so much unsaid. Her impact is still felt in the way fashion remembers the 1990s. Watch any documentary, flip through any retrospective coffee table book, and Claudia's face will appear, framed as one of the definitive icons of the age. Younger models, from Gisele Bündchen to Heidi Klum, have cited her as an influence, proof that a woman could dominate the industry while also crossing into mainstream recognition. Even today, luxury houses continue to echo her image in their campaigns. Cool, blonde, symmetrical perfection. And among fans, especially those now over 40 who lived through the supermodel era, Claudia represents nostalgia itself. She evokes a time when fashion felt larger than life, when models weren't just faces but phenomena. To remember Claudia Schiffer is to remember the 1990s, the glamour, the extravagance, the illusion of perfection that defined the decade before social media stripped away mystery. But perhaps Claudia's greatest legacy is the question she left behind. What does it mean to walk away at the height of your power? Was it strength, the ultimate act of control in an industry designed to consume? Or was it surrender, a quiet admission that the illusion could not hold forever? Her retreat doesn't answer these questions. It creates them. And in those unanswered questions lies her immortality. Claudia Schiffer's story is not just about beauty or fame. It is about the cost of perfection, the fragility of myth, and the haunting power of silence. She was everywhere, then nowhere. Yet in that vanishing act, she became more present than ever. Her legacy is not simply the cover she graced or the contracts she signed. It is the mystery she left behind. And that mystery continues to echo in fashion, in nostalgia, in the way we speak about beauty and its illusions. Claudia Schiffer remains untouchable, not because she never fell, but because she walked away before anyone could see her stumble.
Claudia Schiffer's story is a reminder that perfection often carries the heaviest price. She entered the world of fashion as a shy girl from a quiet German town and became the embodiment of glamour itself, a woman sculpted into myth by magazines, designers, and millions of admirers. She reigned at a time when the word supermodel held more power than any celebrity title. Yet, unlike her peers, she chose silence over spectacle, retreat over reinvention. And in that silence, she achieved something none of them could. She became untouchable. Her career is remembered not only for its scale, thousands of covers, multi-million-dollar contracts, endless campaigns, but for the questions it leaves behind. Who was Claudia Schiffer when the camera stopped flashing? Was she the ice queen by choice or by necessity? Did she walk away because she was tired of the mask or because she knew the mask was beginning to crack? These questions have no answer, and perhaps that is the point. Claudia built her legend not on what she revealed, but on what she withheld. In a way, her disappearance was her greatest performance. Models are expected to age out, to fade, to reinvent themselves desperately in order to cling to relevance. Claudia denied the industry that spectacle. She refused to let the world see her falter. Instead, she walked away, locking the door behind her, leaving her image preserved in the amber of the 1990s. For her, absence was not failure, it was power. Today, when younger generations scroll through archives of old campaigns or watch retrospectives of fashion's golden decade, Claudia's image still startles. The symmetry, the gaze, the perfection. It feels timeless, but also haunting. She does not belong to the present. She belongs to memory, to nostalgia, to that liminal space where legends live. That perhaps is the truest mark of an icon, to be remembered not as you are, but as you once were, suspended forever in a moment of perfection. And yet, beneath that perfection lies the uneasy truth. Claudia Schiffer's story forces us to question the very nature of beauty and fame. Is perfection ever real, or is it always a performance? Is silence strength, or is it fear? Was her retreat an act of freedom, or the price she had to pay for being flawless? These questions linger, and they are what keep her myth alive. Her legacy is not simply about fashion. It is about the paradox of being visible to the entire world and yet remaining invisible as a person. It is about how silence can be louder than words, how absence can be more powerful than presence. Claudia Schiffer didn't just model clothes. She modeled the illusion of perfection. And then, when the illusion threatened to consume her, she did the one thing no one expected. She vanished. Perhaps that is why she still captivates us. Because Claudia Schiffer didn't just live in the golden age of fashion, she transcended it. She left us with questions we will never answer, and in those questions lies her immortality. She is not just a supermodel of the past, she is a symbol of beauty's fragility, of perfection's cost, of the haunting silence that follows when the lights go out. So we are left with the riddle. Did Claudia Schiffer step away to protect herself, to preserve her image, to live freely at last? Or does she retreat because the mask had grown too heavy, because the performance could no longer be sustained? Was it freedom or surrender? The truth remains locked behind her icy smile, a secret she has never shared, and likely never will.